This video is kindly brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to create a beautiful online presence.
Hi, my name's Janelle and welcome back to Rosery Apparel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing how to make the ultimate gathered dress. This dress here has more gathers than any dress I have in my wardrobe, and because of that, I am absolutely in love with it. And it's also been made up of just 7 rectangles of fabric, so it's therefore very easy to self-draft a pattern in order to make this dress, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that step by step in this video. For this project, I'm going to be using this adorable linen tablecloth, and all up you're going to need approximately 3 to 5 meters of fabric, depending on your size and the length you'd like your dress to be. Like I mentioned, this dress is made up of 8 rectangles of fabric, so let's start by measuring up the rectangles to make the dress bodice. To make the bodice of the dress, you will need to cut 2 rectangles that measure your bust measurement by about 35 centimeters or 13 3/4 inches. Mark these measurements directly onto your fabric with a water erasable pen or some tailor's chalk, and then cut them out. Next, fold the bodice rectangles in half widthways, and then mark out the following triangles along the non-folded sides. Then cut these triangles out. This will give the bodice a little bit of shape and will also create a space to inset the sleeves later on. Next, take just one of the now cut rectangles and fold it in half again, and this time along the folded edge, cut out a curved keyhole opening with the following measurements, which once unfolded will look like this. For the sleeves, cut out another 2 rectangles with the following measurements. Then, with the 2 rectangles on top of one another, fold them in half widthways and mark out the following triangles along the non-folded edges. Then once again, cut these triangles out. And your sleeve pieces should now look a little something like this. So we now have the 4 pieces needed to make the bodice of the dress. For the bodice, we're also going to need about 1.5 meters or 1.5 yards of bias binding, and you can either buy some pre-made bias binding or you can make some bias binding in the same fabric as your dress. To make the bias binding, you will need one of these bias binding makers. Start by cutting some strips along the bias of your fabric that match the required width for your particular bias binding maker. You may need to stitch multiple strips together to get the 1.5 meter length needed. To do this, place the strips together with right sides together like this, and then stitch them together like this, trying to keep the seam allowance as small as possible. Next, feed the bias strip through your bias binding maker, pressing the folded edges as you feed the strip of fabric through. Once your bias binding is made, fold and press it in half once more so that all of the raw edges of the fabric are enclosed onto the inside. Now it's time to finally get started on the bodice, but before we do that, let's just take a quick break to talk about the sponsor of this video. This video has been very kindly sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to create a beautiful online presence and launch your passion project. If you're in search of a website builder that is both easy to use and aesthetically pleasing, then look no further than Squarespace. Squarespace makes it so easy to create your dream website all by yourself. You simply select from their range of beautifully designed templates, and then you can change up the templates as much or as little as you like. You can easily change everything from the overall layout of the website to all the fun things like the fonts and colors with just a few clicks, making it an actual breeze to create a stunning website all by yourself in literally just an afternoon. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an artist, or a blogger, Squarespace has absolutely everything you need to showcase your work online. And because the templates are fully customizable, you can create a website that truly reflects your unique style and brand. So if you'd like to create a website of your own, then make sure you head to squarespace.com and take advantage of their free trial so you can really test out just how easy it is to create your dream website all by yourself. And then when you're ready to launch your beautiful new website, head to squarespace.com/roseryapparel for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the tutorial. First up, we're going to attach the bias binding that we just made to the curved keyhole opening. Place the folded bias binding along the raw edge of the curve and pin it in place. Then stitch the bias binding in place, making sure to secure both sides of the binding as you sew. The bias binding has a slight stretch to it due to it being cut along the bias of the fabric, which means it should be able to stretch nicely around the curve without puckering or gathering up at all. Next, take the sleeve pieces and with right sides together, place the top angled edge of the sleeve to the top angled edge of one of the bodice pieces. Then attach the other top angled edge of the sleeve to the other bodice piece, and keep repeating this until you have a full circle of bodice sleeve, bodice sleeve. Which should look a little something like this. Sew all of the pieces together with a 1 cm or 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once stitched, overlock or zigzag stitch the raw edges to prevent them from fraying. And your sleeve and bodice pieces should now be nicely attached to one another like this. Next, fold and press the top edge of the sleeve and the bodice in by about 1 cm or 1/2 inch. And then fold it again by about 2.5 cm or 1 inch. It may struggle in some areas to lay perfectly flat, but that is totally okay and won't be noticeable at all once the dress is gathered up. Stitch this folded edge in place. Next, take the remaining bias binding and stitch the folded edges in place so that all of the raw edges are enclosed onto the inside. This is going to be a tie for the bodice neckline. Attach a safety pin to the end of the tie, and then use the safety pin to feed the tie into the casing we just made, using the openings at the keyhole edge to feed the tie through. Gather up the fabric along the tie as you feed it through the casing. Once the tie has been fed all the way through, tighten up the gathering as much as you can to make the neck edge of the bodice smaller, and then tie the tie into a bow. And your bodice should now be looking like this. Next, with right sides together, fold one side of the bodice onto the other, and then pin and stitch the sides together like this. And the bodice is starting to come together nicely. Next, fold and press the raw edges of the sleeves in by about 1 cm or 1/2 inch twice. And then stitch these folded edges in place, making sure to leave a 1 inch opening to be able to feed some elastic through. Then take some 10mm wide elastic and measure it so that it sits comfortably around your forearm, making sure to add 1 centimeter or 2 extra to be able to stitch the two ends together later, and then cut 2 pieces out at this measurement. Once again, use a safety pin to feed the elastic into the sleeve casings. Once fed all the way through, stitch the 2 ends of the elastic together with a zigzag stitch. and then sew the opening of the sleeve casing closed. And the bodice of the dress is now complete. Now to get started on the skirt. To figure out the rectangles for the skirt, start by measuring the width of the bottom edge of the bodice, and then divide this measurement by 2. Then add 50 centimeters or 20 inches to this measurement. This will be the width of the 2 rectangles that will make up the first tier of the dress skirt. You can make the length however long you'd like, but I made mine 35 centimeters or 14 inches. Then cut 2 rectangles out at these measurements. For the second tier, you're going to need to cut out 2 rectangles that measure approximately double the first tier rectangles. So for example, my 2 first tier rectangles measured 110 centimeters wide, so my second tier rectangles will need to be 220 centimeters wide. You may need to stitch multiple widths of fabric together to get a piece this long. Again, you can make the length as long as you'd like, but I also made this tier 35 centimeters or 14 inches. To make up the skirt, start by taking the rectangles that will make up the second tier and stitch 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top raw edges. Next, gently pull on the top 2 threads to gather up the fabric until it's approximately the same width as the first tier rectangles. Then with right sides together, pin the gathered rectangle to the first tier rectangle, and then stitch it in place. Once stitched, carefully remove the exposed gathering stitches with a seam ripper, and then give the gathering a good press with your iron. Then repeat this process until you have 2 identical skirt pieces. One will be the skirt front and one will be the skirt back. Next, using my free pocket template, cut out 4 pocket pieces from your remaining fabric. You can find a link to download my pocket template in the description below this video. Then overlock or zigzag stitch the curved raw edges to prevent them from fraying. Then with right sides together, pin the pocket pieces to the skirt sides approximately 5 centimeters or 2 inches away from the top edge of the skirt. Then stitch them in place and overlock the raw edges. Then again, with right sides together, place the skirt pieces together, matching up the pockets, and stitch them together along the sides like this. Next, sew 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top of the skirt like this. I actually found it easier to sew these gathered stitches along the front and the back of the skirt separately. Then once again, gently pull on the top 2 threads to gather up the skirt until it's approximately the same size as the bodice. Then with right sides together, pin the bodice to the skirt, matching the side seams together. And then stitch the bodice in place, making sure to stitch with approximately a 1-inch seam allowance for this part. We're going to be making a casing at the waist to thread some elastic through, which will nicely cinch the dress in at the waist a little bit. Once the first row of stitching is done, sew another row, but this time sew with just a 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch seam allowance. And also make sure to leave a small opening to be able to thread the elastic through. Then once again, using some 10mm wide elastic, measure a piece that sits comfortably around your waist. Again, also add a centimeter or 2 extra for stitching the ends together. Then use a safety pin to thread the elastic into the casing at the waist. A helpful tip when threading elastic is to pin the other end of the elastic to the dress so that it doesn't accidentally get pulled into the casing. Once thread all the way through, stitch the two ends of the elastic together with a zigzag stitch. And then sew the casing opening closed. Then overlock or zigzag stitch the raw edges to prevent them from fraying. Lastly, give the gathers a good press with your iron. And then finish off the dress by hemming the skirt. And your ultimate gathered dress is complete. So, how does it look? So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do have a go at making a dress just like this one, then I would love to see it. So please feel free to tag me at Rosery Apparel when you share your photos on Instagram. And if you did enjoy this video, it would really mean a lot to me if you could give it a like, and make sure you subscribe to my channel for more sewing type videos like this one. Thank you so much for watching this video until the very end, and I'll see you in the next one.